just to welcome everyone. Good morning, and thank you, colleagues, for putting this webinar in place. And I think today what we will be discussing is a little bit to analyze the experience we have already having early interaction with CHMP. This interaction was initiated with patients and patient organizations, and it has been agreed by everyone, by patients and regulators, that this has been a successful initiative that now we are extended to healthcare professionals. So in this training today, we will try to analyze the experience that we have acquired over this time, and to see and to be able to hear the experiences from the patient experience and how this can be extrapolated to healthcare professionals, and hopefully to be able to look ahead with this successful initiative by which CHMP and CHMP members have already access to the users of future medicines from the very beginning, so that whenever there is a need, we can have a good and quick dialogue and information which is needed to really get the best outcome, regulatory outcome. But not only that, it's also to give the opportunity to those who are going to be using these medicines to give the opportunity to already make contributions that they feel are important and that they can be made well in advance of the process, so that we are not missing anything. There are no gaps, which experience has shown is very often the case. So again, this has been a great initiative, and I would like to thank Fatima Ventura and Maria Mabris, who are going to be chairing this session, and which we hope that is really useful. And as Maria said, it will be recorded, so it can be used for future reference whenever patients and healthcare professionals approach this initiative. So thank you again for everybody's interest, and I think without any delay, I hand over to Fatima and Maria.
Thank you very much, Juan. So as you can see, we have the agenda up on the screen, and so we will go through this agenda, and we have a lot of time for open discussion. As Juan has said, we just want to give a little bit of background about what started as a pilot but is now an integrated methodology. And today, as we've said, is really the expansion to the healthcare professional organizations, which was already announced at the March the 3rd joint meeting. But from here on, we will be working together along with Kaiser Immonen to expand this to the healthcare professionals. So I'll just take you through the next few slides. So Rumi, if we could have the next slide, please. Unless I can do that too, I'm not sure. Okay, so as you know this figure very, very well, we use it all the time, but it's really just to remind you of the different stages of the regulatory life cycle and to show you where patients and healthcare professionals already provide extensive input into all aspects, either as members of committees, consultation as experts on disease-specific areas or medicine-specific areas, and also review of documents. So in the next slide, we're going to show you a little bit where we're focusing today, which is on the evaluation section. So the evaluation has been shown here in the vertical arrow, showing you the days from the start day, the different assessment reports that exist, the clock stops, which are also very important, and the length of the clock stop is determined by the industry response, all the way through to the CHMP decision and finally, opinion, and finally the commission decision. If Rumi, if you could click, what we're looking at today is the start at day 1. And importantly here, it's the consultation of organizations. And this is really the first time that organizations have been consulted on medicine-specific questions. As you can see from the 2 blue circles, that there are also other opportunities later in the life cycle during the evaluation phase where we can consult as well, such as scientific advisory groups or ad hoc expert groups and oral explanations. And if you can click again, please, Rumi. Here, this is the consultation of individual experts. So it's very important to make that distinction here as well between a consultation of organizations and individuals. So in the next slide, you can see here the template letter, and I'm sorry for the busyness of this slide, but part of it will disappear in a moment. So for the patients, you already have experience, most of you, of having seen this template letter where we're looking at some of the aspects that are important to patients, carers, such as quality of life, standard treatments, how acceptable they are, unmet needs, and what would be the benefits and hopes that you would have in a new medicine. So many of you have already answered a lot of these questions and come back to us, and this has been very much appreciated. And first, this started as a pilot, and if Rumi, you could click. We have the outcome of the pilot, which Fatima also kindly presented in the March 3rd meeting, but just very quickly, there were 37 procedures over 17 months. As Juan has already reiterated, this was successful, and the first step after this positive outcome was to move from only looking at orphan diseases or rare diseases to all diseases that required additional attention. And now, as of today, we are extending to healthcare professionals. So here you can see some of the positive outcome of this pilot. So in the next slide. So as we've said, beyond the pilot phase, I've already mentioned this, extending not only to rare diseases, but also to healthcare professionals. So in the next slide, I'll hand over to Ivana to take you through the next steps and how we proceeded.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Marie, and good morning, everyone. Indeed, so this is just a basic and more fundamental comment before we move on the aspects of how we developed the template that we will be using with organizations. This comes in the context of our framework of interaction with healthcare professionals, and this is indeed a very welcome initiative because it is an additional step and an additional engagement opportunity that we have to bring organizations and the input that they can bring from their communities to the procedures that CHMP is looking at. So this, be reminded, it really comes in the context of the framework of interaction. As Maria mentioned, this is the uniqueness of this engagement at the moment with CHMP is that it is with the organizations that you represent, and there then will be other opportunities with individuals in the individual capacity. So in this context, we are really very keen to move forward with the bringing to life this extension, gaining and building up from the patient's experience. And what we've done was really looking at the template that had been developed and used by the patient organizations for this early contact with the CHMP. We asked the CHMP sponsors of this initiative to have a look to see how we would could we adapt this template? Should we keep it exactly in the same way? Should we reformulate a little bit the questions? And that's indeed what we've done. We've also consulted with the co-chair of the Healthcare Professionals Working Party to really validate that the questions, the essence is still there. It's still the same as for the template used for patient organizations. The questions have been slightly reworded. As you imagine, there will be a slightly different coming from a slightly different angle for the patient as that from the patient organization. So it has been agreed with also once we have updated the template, it has been agreed by the CHMP chair and co-chair, and now we're ready for implementation. So I think this is where we are, and also, of course, I would imagine that with time and with the using the template, there's always an opportunity to revisit if something is not sufficiently clear, and that we can only know with experience and with time. So it's something that we can always reassess as we move on in time. I think, Maria, this is what I wanted to mention. So over to you. In case there are any further questions, I will be happy to also hear and learn with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ivana. That's perfect. So if we can go to the next slide, I think here is where we hand over to Fatima, and I would also like to add my thanks to Juan's towards Fatima and all of her hard work with supporting this methodology. After Fatima's presentation, we're also going to hear experiences from 3 of the patient organizations that I think will also be helpful to you all, the healthcare professionals on the call and also the other patients on the call, to give you a sense of what their experiences have been. And then, as I said, we'll finish with a very long time for open discussion. So with that, I hand over to Fatima. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maria, and thank you, Ivana, as well. Good morning to everyone. I would like to thank Juan for the words. He really highlighted the relevance of this exercise, and we are now having a step forward to increase it to other stakeholders. So next slide, please. So I have, yes. So like Maria said, patient representatives have been involved, and also in this case, also healthcare professionals in various time points from the activities of EMA, and including evaluation as well, but a little bit later in the procedure, where sometimes there is a really problem with the product, and we convene ad hoc expert meetings or SAG meetings, where we can hear the perspectives from patients and healthcare professionals. But like I said, sometimes it's too late in the procedure to make really deep changes. So the aim of these was really to get earlier input, earlier contact with the relevant patient and consumer organizations at the very beginning. And what we aimed was to get feedback on quality of life, treatment options, and medical needs for the disease in particular, so that CHMP is well aware of these since the beginning of the assessment, which you are the ones that are close to the disease, and sometimes little steps for you, little steps for us are big steps for you, and we have to be aware of that. So with this, we expect to facilitate also further interactions along the procedures. I remember Francois made some suggestion during our meeting that these could be extended also for the day 80, and we are assessing that possibility as well. In fact, all these exercises in line with the CHMP work plan and also with EMA's regulatory science strategy. So we are aligned in these aims. Next slide. I would like to give you what is the message that rapporteurs receive from EMA, inviting them to include the comments received from patient organizations in the Day 80 assessment report. So Maria and before Natalie invited the rapporteurs to include a brief summary of the main points made by the organization in a relevant section, efficacy, safety, with no, and that's it, with no judgment on the medicine made by the organization themselves. So purely objective, subjective, but objective way of giving their perspectives. And that's how people have been doing. Next slide. So I'm giving you some examples. Next slide. Some examples where this information has been gathered. So the Day 80, for you, if you don't know, the Day 80 assessment report is followed up by Day 100 comments from other CHMP members, and then a joint Day 120 list of questions or assessment report. And we can find already the inclusion of this contribution in the Day 80 100 list of questions. That is the one that goes to the applicant. And in case of this example, it was maintained until the end of the procedure. So this section was kept it as that, and it was included in the executive summary. And in the beginning of this day 120 overview assessment report. Next slide. And for the same product, this information was then moved in the end of the procedure. So at the CHMP assessment report that will lead in the end to the European Public Assessment Report, EPAR, it was moved from the executive summary to the benefit risk balance in this highlighted section, additional considerations on the benefit risk balance. So in other words, this contribution was included in the ultimate decision-making issue, that is the benefit risk balance of the product. Next slide. Another example where this has been kept. So in the executive summary and with the headline patients engagement, so precisely identified. This has been kept from until at least the day 180 second list of questions, so along the procedure. This was for Pompe's disease. Next slide. Another one that already made some different since the beginning. So since the beginning for this product, the information was already included in the benefit risks assessment. In the head section, see feedback from a patient organization. And in this case, I found it curiously because the rapporteurs really covered all the points that are highlighted in the survey that we sent for patient organizations. So it was a very complete feedback from the patients that was really included in our assessment report, and this is really important. So focusing on the medical history, in the symptoms, the treatments used, the expectations with the new treatment. Next slide. And then another example where the information was already included in the benefit risk assessment, but again on the additional considerations on the benefit risk balance. And I highlighted the sentence, the very first sentence, that the contribution of patient representative is acknowledged and welcomed. And I think this is really good to see that the exercise that we thought in the summer of 2021, I believe, or 2020, has become such welcomed by the rapporteurs. Next slide. This is already one example that I think is the ultimate aim of our exercise, is that this becomes public. So Oxybrita is an authorized product, one of the very first that were included in the pilot. And this is still it was maintained in the EPAR. So this is taken from the EPAR. And you see that this is included in the scientific discussion part from EPAR under the section management, and in particular under the section unmet medical need. So it was highlighted that this product was included in the pilot, and the feedback that was received from, in this case, from Eurordis, is clearly mentioned in the EPAR. So it is public. Everyone can see that this has participated from patient representatives in the decision-making process as well. Next slide. And this goes the information that is still, that you can find it in this EPAR. So it's really, I believe it's really important. Next slide. So the whole information, it's there, including these patient expectations from a new treatment. So it was really interesting to make this exercise for this presentation, because I think this is the first one that has become public, the exercise that we had. Next slide. So as you have seen on the examples I gave, the way the rapporteurs include the information in the assessment reports is not harmonized, not in the location, sometimes in the clinical assessment report, sometimes in the overview, during the overview, sometimes in the executive summaries, sometimes in benefit risk assessment section, and in different subsections. Also, there is the extension of the information included is not the same. Sometimes it's summarized, more summarized, sometimes it's focused on each point of the surveys. And what we aim is that this information, because it's gathered from the day one, should be included not only in day 80 assessment report, but through all the assessment process. And so we are now currently reviewing the templates for the clinical assessment report and the overview, and to include a dedicated section for patients' perspective, and also we are already counting on that for HCP perspective. And the ultimate aim, like I said, is to get this input into the EPAR to make public patients and HCP contributions to decision making. This is really an important step forward. And I think this is my last slide. So, next slide. Oh no. So this is the sum. I have already presented this in March. So we had after the pilot about 3 orphans in September 2022, 5 procedures in October 2022, another 5 in December, 2 in December in the end of the month, and we are ongoing with 6 additional procedures that started in January. So we have a lot more to become a reality from what I have just said. Next slide. I think now is it. Yes.
Okay, so now I'll hand over to Kate. And the next 3 presentations, I'm just to remind the speakers, are supposed to be quite short so we can leave enough time for discussion. So Josie followed by, Kate, followed by Francois, then followed by Anna, and we'll try to keep it within 5 minutes each. So thank you very much.
Hi everyone, so I'm Kate Morgan, I'm Co-Chief Executive at Myeloma Patients Europe. I just wanted to talk briefly today about our experience of working with the EMA and CHMP on the early contact methodology. Next slide. So because the myeloma pathway is quite crowded, particularly at the end, we have been asked to participate in around 5 requests for patient information on myeloma treatments, and particularly in the relapsed refractory setting. And for those of you that don't know, myeloma is a rare form of bone marrow cancer. So generally, because the forms for the CHMP are quite general and you can kind of choose what you want to talk about, essentially, we basically summarize the published papers on patient experience, quality of life and preferences. We kind of struggle a bit because myeloma patients have quite different pathways of treatment, and it's a very chronic cancer for some patients. So it's quite difficult to kind of summarize the experience of all patients. So we try and kind of focus it a bit. And as well as summarizing the key published papers, I think from our perspective and from the work that we do with kind of reimbursement bodies, we think that some information that the CHMP should find helpful is information on what patients think about the drug that they're assessing. And I know that there's not a specific question about that, but what we do is we summarize in lay terms the clinical trial data for the drug that's being assessed. And we present that to patients and ask them a series of questions about their perspective on the medicine. And we also ask more general questions about their experience and things that they would like to tell the EMA about having myeloma. And then what we do is we thematically analyze and summarize the findings in our response to the EMA, and we submit that. Next slide, please. And so I think we've generally been really happy with the approach, and we're getting better at it as time goes on. In terms of looking at positives from an MPE perspective, when we speak to patients, they're really happy to be being asked about their opinion on a medicine and EMA assessment. And I think they really find it meaningful. And we get really good feedback and insightful feedback from patients. And we're starting to get more and more people involved, which is really, really nice to see. And I think it really, from our perspective, it puts a lot of the data into context. So we hear a lot from industry, for example, about grade 2 side effects really not being a problem for patients. But when you actually speak to a patient about a grade 2 side effect, it can be quite impactful on their quality of life. So it's really kind of teasing out some of the nuances that you see with the data. I think in terms of areas for improvement for us, we need to get a more robust sample of patients and more specific to the treatment that's being assessed. And I think it's quite difficult because we're only providing data to the patients that is published. So we're not really aware of what is actually being assessed in detail by the EMA. And also, I think we need to get better at anticipating what medicines are coming down the line. So you're given about 3 to 4 weeks to do this, but I think it's always a bit of a surprise for us when we get asked. And I think we need to get better at thinking, well, these medicines are in a trial that's completed, so the EMA is likely to ask us about that soon. So we should get ourselves together and think about preparing this in advance before we're asked. In terms of the positives from an EMA perspective, I think it's brilliant to have a systematic involvement of patients. It's much needed, and it really increases the patient voice. And as I said, patients are really happy to be being asked, and I think it helps with transparency and feeling of being involved. And there's a dialogue between patients and the EMA. I think in terms of areas for improvement, what I struggle with is that when completing it, and I know it's kept broad for a reason, but I think sometimes more specific guidance on what is useful to the CHMP in their decision making would be really helpful. I did a lot of work with the Scottish Medicines Consortium when they were building their patient involvement process. And the committee actually fed back to patient groups that they needed, they really liked quotes. They didn't need like extensive, robust surveys. They wanted direct quotes from patients that had been through the experience. And then they provided very specific questions that they wanted from patient groups. And I think that could potentially kind of point us more in the right direction. And also, and this is something that will come with time, but feedback is useful after submission. So was it actually any good? Did people read it? How could we improve for next time? Because there's no point us creating like lots of information that is in essence unhelpful or just not what they want. So I think as we go forward, we just need to open that dialogue a bit more, and I think that's starting, which is really good. And yeah, so I think I've covered most of the points. So next slide. And I just wanted to, I was just thinking about recommendations for HCP and patient organisations that are kind of going through the process. And I think having discussions like this is really helpful to understand what others are doing. And to my point, I think we all need to just try and anticipate medicines coming down the line. So as organisations, particularly in the patient setting, we need to be thinking all of the time about how we generate data that is useful to assist decision making, both at EMA level, but also with industry earlier on and with kind of reimbursement and payers, because there's always a need for this data. So I don't think we should wait until we're asked. I think you need to kind of think about ways of seeking opinion quickly from members, because there is quite a tight timeline, and you need to kind of think about how you're going to get as much information from people as possible in that time frame. And I think engaging with the EMA and CHMP again about what's useful and their information needs is important where possible. In terms of next steps for the CHMP early contact, as I said previously, I think perhaps if it's useful to get information from patient groups on a specific drug and patient perspectives, then it would be helpful to see kind of more information about like the decision-making problem. So what trials are you looking at? Because there can be quite a lot of trials in a specific medicine. I think if it's possible to have a sort of a clear feedback loop for participants, that would be helpful too, just to make sure that we're doing the right thing and kind of answering the right questions. Other things that I've seen work well with reimbursement bodies is having examples of good, like what constitutes a good submission on the website, and kind of peer support. So if someone is kind of getting started in providing their perspective, perhaps linking them to someone who's already been through the process in facilitating a dialogue. And finally, I think perhaps the forms, from my opinion anyway, and I'd be interested to hear the thoughts of others, but maybe more specific questions on the disease, because as I said at the start, because myeloma is very, it's very heterogeneous and very individual. So if we were to summarize the experience of patients across the pathway, I could write perhaps a book about that. So maybe having kind of a shorter, like more specific questions could help kind of hone in exactly what we should be providing. So next slide, I think that's the end. Perfect. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Kate. I will hand over immediately to Francois. Francois, we've added all of your slides here, but it would be great if you could just focus on the key ones that you'd like to present, because you have a few. Thank you, Francois.
Yes, thank you, Maria. And I won't use the presentation, just to add to what Kate said, that, in our case, and I think we reviewed 27 products, and for rare diseases for which patient organizations rarely publish information in relation to the questions that CHMP rapporteurs might have. So that's why we decided quite a different approach to interview patients directly. And some of them interact early with the developers, and that's a response to Mark. But not always. And I think in my case, it's only 5 or 6 products for which I could discuss with patients who had been consulted by the developer at an earlier phase. And it's still interesting to interview patients at this stage, because sometimes they don't agree with the development plan of the developer, but they were not listened to by the developer. So here they have an early opportunity to express questions, concerns, issues with the rapporteurs at the very beginning of the evaluation. Of course, it may not change much at this stage, because more or less the development cannot be changed. But anyway, it gives indications on discussions that will happen, if not at the EMA, in the next phase, or at the clinic, when a completely different use of the medicine, sometimes off-label, will be real life. The interviews are not easy to organize, because it's difficult to find patients who have 1 hour in English, but the medical coordinators of European reference networks, patient organizations, social networks, all possible sources to identify the patients are used. And I start from a blank page. We rarely discuss the product in itself, and we focus on the questions raised by the rapporteurs. And I think it really helps to know how the rapporteurs work at this stage. It really helps to have had the experience of being consulted as individual expert by rapporteurs, because it helps to understand which information is most useful to them. So in average, I interview 3 patients per product, from 0 to 8, and the quality of the memo depends on who I interview. Not all patients have the same richness of comment or information to provide, but time is limited, so we have to do within the 30 days in average. It's difficult, I agree with Kate, it's difficult to know how useful each memo is for the rapporteurs, even if with experience we learn and we have an idea that some contributions, some information, some facts can really help the rapporteurs interpret what is really important for the patients, what they would expect, which unmet needs they have, how they would assess the efficacy of a new medicine themselves, in which circumstances they would be interested to take a new medicine if this one is authorized, what they think of existing treatments, their benefits, their side effects, their difficulties of use. I think it's interesting to express this in their language, using their terms, and to share this with the rapporteurs, even if the same discussions had taken place in the past with the developer. I think it's important to rephrase this with at this stage of the evaluation. So of course there is no information that we can discuss on the product. I think you can skip the presentation completely. We sometimes look at the clinical trial registries to see, at least to discuss which endpoints have been used in clinical trials, so that we can also discuss with other things could have been evaluated, which haven't been, and sometimes the patient organizations are aware of research in progress for a new scale on quality of life or other tools, which we can still flag to the rapporteurs, because as Fatima explained, if the marketing authorization is conditional, then maybe additional endpoints or different outcome measures can be proposed for the next step for the post-launch evaluation. And ideally, at day 80, truly, this is when the rapporteurs have already identified the main benefits and the main risks around which the opinion will be made at the end of the evaluation. It would be key to consult with a few patients and clinicians at this stage, at least to verify that side effects which haven't been selected for the effects tables are less maybe important than the ones that have been selected. So I think to see if there is an agreement on the effects tables is important at day 80. And on our side, we're working with those who developed from IMI Prefer the different techniques to elicit patient preferences, if they could adapt their method so that it could be conducted during the CHMP timelines between day 80 and the end of the evaluation. And I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francois. We'll have more time to discuss and in the after Anna's presentation as well. So with that, we'll move on to Anna and Diane. Thank you.
Hi, hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Anna Diaz. I'm Project Officer at Alzheimer's Europe, and I'm here with my colleague Diane Gove, who is Director for Projects, and who will be joining for the discussion. So next slide, please. So Alzheimer's Europe is a European umbrella organization. We have 41 members who are national Alzheimer's organization. And our involvement is about people with dementia. So when Maria was explaining that they reach out to patient organizations, in our case, what that means that we provide feedback about conversations or meeting with people who are living with dementia. And we have a lot of experience in the organization in consulting people living with different types of dementia. And over the years, we have developed a model and we have a structure for this. And in our experience, it's possible and very important and valuable to involve people with dementia, provided that they have appropriate support in doing so. As drug development is now also focusing earlier on earlier stages of the disease, we also have started to involve in our discussions people who are at the pre-dementia stage, so who have mild cognitive impairment. And we only have received one request, so much less than the previous speakers, but that was very relevant as well, but because in our case, that was a request for a medicine intended for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease. And at that point, for those of you who are not familiar with the disease, just to tell you that over the last almost 20 years, there have been no new drug for Alzheimer's in the market. So you can imagine this is a big new thing in the field. And also to say that previous and existing treatments are mostly symptomatic in the case of Alzheimer's, where the new drugs that have been now developed are more disease-modifying treatments. So it's also a big difference, a lot of new things in the field and the new approaches. So what we did, we involved 6 people with dementia who are members of our European Working Group of People with Dementia. This is an existing group composed of 15 people living with dementia. And because the request and the treatment specifically ask about people with mild cognitive impairment, we drew on existing project-related advisory boards who are led by Alzheimer's Europe, and we also involved 4 people who have mild cognitive impairment. So in total, we involved 10 people, and we conducted 3 different focus group discussions. And just to give a bit of background, we sent all the people with dementia and MCI information in advance, and we included 3 main things. The first about the EMA, the actual process, and why they had been asked to be involved in these meetings. Then we also sent a very brief summary of the drug that was under discussion. And finally, we sent the general question that Maria was presenting, but as well, we received 2 additional questions by the rapporteurs, which were very specific about some aspect of the drug. My colleague Diana and myself facilitated the discussions, and each of the discussions lasted around 1 hour and a half, and we recorded the discussions and took notes during the meeting as well. After the 3 sessions, we produced a combined summary with what the 3 groups have said to us. We circulated the summary to all the people involved and for further feedback and approval. Next slide, please. So I think one of the main thing that we wanted to say today is the main feedback, and it's the same that Kay was saying, is that everyone consulted felt really impressed and honored to be asked. And I think this topic of potential benefit and risk and the side effects of medication is really relevant to people. Is what they're going is about the hopes, and it's around something they're going to be consuming in the future. So it's a really important topic. It was very important for us as well to have 3 different focus groups that give more people a chance to provide feedback. We were able to cover a wider range of views and perspective, but on the other hand, this actually was a challenge for us to reduce the vast amount of feedback from 3 meetings to only 2 pages. The time frame that was mentioned as well, that was also a bit short, so it's quite difficult to meet all these meetings and reports in a few weeks. And another challenge I wanted to mention today is that we're not always certain when putting together the information for them, how much of that was confidential, what to share, but also I think, as Kate was saying, how much detail people need about the medication. And in our case, as I was mentioning before, this is a new type of drug, and there's a lot of controversial information in the media. So how to present that in a way that was meaningful for them, and they were not already influencing the feedback in any way. But I have to say, in general, it was really overall positive experience. Last slide, please. And just some of the questions for reflection we had for today was a bit, I think, also in line with what the other speakers have said. How should the EMA or the CHPM be involved in this beyond initiating the request for feedback? Could they be involved in the planning and prior work for the consultation, or even during the consultation? Would it be beneficial to extend the 2-page summaries to have possibilities of a larger or more feedback? As well as Kate was saying, what kind of feedback is useful for them? Are they looking for more direct quotes or about the major concern, how to put that back to them? And again, as Kate was saying, how can we know about the value? So how can we improve what we do? And how much can we share back to the people who have been involved? Thank you.